Welcome back to another episode of Further Comments, Damien.
I'm really thrilled to be here. Anytime I get to talk with Horace Wu, it's a lovely day.
Oh, you're very kind. Well, you don't know what topics we're talking about today, nor do I really. I'm just making it up as I go. But I've been thinking a lot about a certain topic, which is what I'm going to call the elephant in the room. There's a lot of tech vendors who are out there claiming that AI is going to solve everything and that very soon we're going to hit AGI. It's going to be more intelligent than human beings and therefore it will do everything for us. And three ideas kind of come out of that. The first is, are we just entering another hype cycle again where there's a divergence of promises and reality? Second is, with AI agents being kind of on the horizon, there's a question of whether we should and whether we could are two different questions. And the third is this idea that is language model, the large language models we have today, the way to reach AGI? And there's a lot of debate in the scientific communities about that as well. So three different topics today: expectation management and promises of vendors. Second topic is just because you could doesn't mean you should. And the third topic is, are we hitting AGI with the current models? Which do you want to tackle first, Damien? This is a smorgasbord.
I love all three of these smorgasbords and all the subcomponents of the smorgasbord. So I like the order that you put them into. Let's talk about first the hype cycle. Everyone knows the Gartner hype cycle, where you have the ascendance, and then you have the trough of disillusionment, and then you have the something.
The plateau of productivity.
Plateau of productivity, right? So
yes.
So there's a real debate as to where we are collectively in that Gartner hype cycle, but I think that's not a very good framing. Pablo Arredondo of Casetext, who you probably know, he and I were co-keynoting a presentation in person, and in that presentation, the topic was the hype cycle and where we are in the hype cycle. And Pablo was saying that I think we're on the ascending slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. And then I was looking out at the sea of lawyers, and I realized, man, they haven't even gotten up to the peak yet. They haven't even gotten to the trough of disillusionment yet. So it made me realize that each of us is separately on our different journeys in the Gartner hype cycle. I think to say that we are here, that is a misnomer. We aren't anywhere. Each of us individually is somewhere. And where each of us is individually is much different than where our organizations are. That is, I might be on the slope of productivity, but my entire organization, organizationally, might be not even up to the peak yet. They haven't even hit the trough. So I think that each of us individually is in a different area in the hype cycle, and each of our organizations is in maybe a separate space in the hype cycle. So I think that, whether AI is too hyped or underhyped really depends on where each of us is on the hype cycle. That is both each of us individually and each of us organizationally. So what do you think about the hype versus expectation? Are we overhyped, underhyped? Where are we in the hype cycle?
I think you bring a really good perspective on this. It's almost like a fractal, right? Like the adoption curve has a certain shape where everybody's on a highway and you're at a different point in the journey as you're driving along this highway to the destination, wherever that destination happens to be. But when you zoom in, it's the same sort of pattern of individuals in organizations on different parts of the journey. And if you zoom in again, different tasks that the individual has are also on different parts of this adoption curve. Yeah, you're right. Like it's not kind of one size fits all. But I think generally speaking, people are kind of progressing towards yes, we know what to do with large language models. Yes, we know how to interact with chatbots. Yes, we know these are the capabilities. So the education element is starting to catch up to where the products are. Certainly not at the frontier. And we'll talk about the frontier in a little bit, because I think like there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment that have been experimented on that have not even been released to the market yet, which will do very impressive things. And we'll talk a little bit later about like impressive versus useful versus accurate, because they're different things.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Let's see if we can actually do some visuals here. We haven't had visuals on this podcast for a while, but let's do a little visual. So because my life is a PowerPoint, of course, there's always a PowerPoint for everything that I want to do. We do that with the hype cycle, where you have visibility over time. But the question is, for whom is the hype cycle? That is, you have the world, which is one vector. You also have where are governments on the hype cycle. That is, where's China versus the EU versus the US? Where's each industry on the hype cycle? Because Gartner really, when they talk about where they are, they're really talking about the Fortune 100. They're not talking about mom and pop shops in Main Street. And then for which firms and for which law departments and for the tech industry, there's separate places. And then for the firms, is this big law or is this boutiques, right? A boutique might be really on the slope of enlightenment, but a big law might be, just down in the trough of disillusionment. And then where's legal tech? Hopefully we're already in the slope of enlightenment or the plateau of productivity, but maybe not. And then you have
which legal tech are you talking about too?
Exactly.
That's going to be different.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then you have just the world generally. I think we're not even close to the peak for the world generally. The average, your grandmother is probably right about here, right? And then you have, the people that are, the creme de la creme versus people law, the regular consumers. And then where's each of us, right? Each of us is a different vector. And then you if you plot each of these here, this is probably where each of us is. Maybe we are each in a different spot. And then each of us, of course, you are the smartest of the smart because you're watching this podcast. So therefore, you are already in the plateau of productivity. So anyways, that is one vector. We'll call it the x-axis. The y-axis is for what work are you doing? Are you doing advisory work? Or are you doing transactional work? Or are you doing regulatory work? Or are you doing litigation work? And I think this is what you were talking about. Like for legal tech, are you transactional legal tech or litigation legal tech or regulatory legal tech or advisory? So these are all the different vectors. And then you have for what types of work. and Edson, who you probably know, they have split it up into cream, core, and commodity. If you think about, how much of the corporate spend is each of these, most of this is core, right, with about 15% cream and about 5% commodity of the spend is here. And then the question is how much of the AI could be able to do each of these. Maybe AI can do about half of the cream, but 85% of the core and 100% of the commodity. That vector of where are we in the hype cycle, right? The commodity, we're pretty far along in the hype cycle. And then when you think about consumers, and the 92% of legal needs that are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive, almost all that work is commodity, with just a little bit of it being core and some of it being cream. So when you think about the opportunity for consumer, I think there's a really big opportunity for us to be able to help consumers be able to do their work faster, better, stronger. And the real question is will we do that? Do we have the intestinal fortitude to do that? Is that a useful framing of the idea of where we are in the hype cycle?
I say this in a tone that's going to suggest otherwise, but Damien, it's almost like you've prepared for this conversation. I think my concern with people being on different points of the adoption curve is that, one, a lot of technology companies are going to be pitching things to customers that they're not ready for yet. Because you can only ever pitch 1 or 2 steps in advance. If you pitch something 5 years away, no one's going to buy it. You're going to be one of those people who you're too early for the market, as the VCs would say. And that's kind of one risk. The other risk is, like, if a vendor promises stuff that actually can't be achieved for a very long time or can't be achieved at all, then we get into this risk of running into an AI winter. People stop spending because they stop believing. I'm cautious that this may be happening again from some of the marketing pitches I've been seeing in recent months. What do you think?
I think that there is a danger there of us overhyping and entering another AI winter like we have for decades in the past. There's a huge AI winter in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, right? We keep doing the up and down cycles. I'm optimistic that we're not quite there yet. We won't have an AI winter this time, largely because the capabilities just keep rocket shipping up. When you think not of the Gartner hype cycle, but of just the exponential growth in large language models, that is the number of tasks from benchmarks that keep getting blown through. I think until those even out and we start plateauing on the capabilities, if we start plateauing, then maybe there's a risk of entering an AI winter. But even then, you have to look at Ethan Mollick that said, okay, let's assume even if all progress stops today, let's say in May of 2025, no more AI progress. OpenAI stops its progress. Anthropic stops its progress. He thinks that we have probably 5 years worth of building on top of the existing models as they are today. We probably have 5 years worth to be able to implement what is today. So anyway, even if we stop today, which we're not going to stop today, right? We're going to keep the exponential growth probably is going to continue. The odds of an AI winter maybe are quite small unless with this caveat, unless those valuations of OpenAI and of Anthropic and of Perplexity and the other companies balloon at such a pace that it's not going to be able to deliver on the world-changing developments that their valuations are, I guess, dependent upon, then maybe we'll see a bubble that pops, and then that bubble will force us into an AI winter again. But even then, again, if that AI winter sets in and then OpenAI stops doing its research, Gemini starts doing its research, Anthropic stops doing its research, again, we'll go back to Moloch, and now we'll just have 5 years of building even after the bubble's popped.
I think you're probably right on that. Like, worst case scenario, tomorrow we discover that, hey, that's it. Like scaling these models is not going to get it smarter. We're done. Everybody starts building, everybody starts focusing on what can today's models do. The risk would be in that scenario is the money that VCs have been sinking into AI that they'll pull away from all of these companies means now the builders are going to have to build on a budget. And that's hard. I was on a call last night with Center for Legal Innovation. One of the questions that was asked during that conversation, this roundtable, was this new partnership model that law firms and vendors have formed. And we see this a lot around the marketplace where law firms are collaborating and co-building things with vendors. Will that last? Is that now the prevailing model going forward? I think everyone in the room was saying yes. And I had to be contrarian and say, well, no, I think it's a flash in the pan. I think this is a rare moment in time where customers don't know what to build, and nor do vendors. And so therefore collaborating is the way to build those useful things. Once we cross this barrier, when we have useful things that's got product and market fit, once in-house teams and law firms have their own internal R&D that can build things themselves, these collaborations will probably dwindle. So I think the market can go in a lot of different directions right now, but I think hype is not a good thing in any of these scenarios.
The real question is hype for one person's overhype is another person's underhype. You've heard the analogy of what part of the elephant are you touching? Because life is a PowerPoint. For those on YouTube, you could see when we talk about, some people say, Big Law, no way, Big Law hasn't implemented AI, right? And then other people say, M&A hasn't been implemented, litigation, right? Then AI will never take cream, but then another person says, oh, AI's already done a lot of commodity things. So I think whether it's overhyped or underhyped depends on what part of the elephant you're touching. Each one of these things is the total addressable market. I think that a lot of times we talk past each other on whether we are underhyped or overhyped. And I think what we should be talking about is for the entire elephant. Is it underhyped or overhyped? Big Law, may be behind the curve, but I know lots of boutiques and I know lots of solo smalls that are doing crazy amount of great work with AI. So for them, it's underhyped, because they're just scratching the surface as to the cool things they're doing. So Big Law, I would agree. Small Law, no way, it's underhyped. Let's really think about what part of the elephant we're talking about, whether we're talking about cream or commodity, Big Law versus Small Law, litigation, transactional. Each one of those is part of the whole elephant total addressable market.
I love that. And I think that's a really nice point to transit to the next topic, which is agents. And we've talked about agents a few times on this podcast, and it hasn't stopped. It's only gotten bigger and more prevalent over the months and months that we've been talking about this. There is now this idea that in 5 years from now, we'll all be running a fleet of agents in our law firms, whether it's big law or small law, right? Agents will replace a certain percentage of the workforce. First of all, what do you think of this scenario? Do you think that's feasible? Do you think that's going to happen? What's your view?
I think it depends on one's definition of agents. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and what is an agent is often also in the eye of the beholder. There's probably two types of agents. Because life is, again, a PowerPoint, I'm going to maybe walk through, this. If you're listening to this audio only, be sure to watch it on YouTube, because there's lots of videos that are going to be accompanying this. Everyone thinks about this as an agent, that I as a user say, what is the goal I want to achieve? And then after that, of course, you have, okay, what are the tasks to achieve that goal? If I want to start a business, maybe you could have the robot create a business plan, and have the robot create an LLC, the robot create a product, create some ads, create a bank account, bring in some revenue. If you have any questions, let me know. Think about all the bad things that can happen with this. That is, there's all sorts of laws that could be broken, right? Imagine if your agent, say if you and I are competitors and our agents collude together, that's an antitrust violation. Or, if I have a consent decree with the FTC and all of a sudden the agent violates that consent decree, right? All sorts of bad things can happen if we have these autonomous agents go out and do work on our behalf. But that's the kind of agents that I think is in everyone's mind's eye. When you think about the legal tasks, and this is a callback to when Jason Barnwell was here, there are very frequent tasks. That is the head of the long tail that are the known and common tasks. And then you have a lot of unknown and uncommon tasks. So what if you have humans code up all of the known and common tasks and then let the machines figure out the less known and less common tasks? Have them maybe go down the rabbit holes and do the bad things. So between the LLM agents, where the human defines the goals, the robot defines the tasks, and then the human in the loop maybe gives a thumbs down or a thumbs up as to whether it should do that task or not, and then maybe have the robot execute them. That's the way we all think about LLM agents, but we should be thinking more about these symbolic AI agents that you and I have built to be able to say, I as a human define the goals, and then I as a human define the tasks. And that human defining the tasks is either Horace or Damien on the vendor side, or the user on the law firm side. Can define those tasks. Don't let the machine define the tasks, let the human define it, and then let the machine execute those tasks, and let the machine then achieve those goals. So between the symbolic agents on the left and the LLM agents on the right, the end user doesn't care. To the end user, it's magical both sides of this. So between the two, why would you go with the probabilistic LLM agent on the right-hand side? Why not go to the deterministic side, the reliable side, rather than the unreliable side? So then you could say, okay, I want the symbolic deterministic side. Let's code up all the things on the left-hand side. Let the large language models figure out the probabilistic side. And then as you collect these probabilistic tasks, then move this over to the right. And then throw it over the transom and be able to say, these are the most common probabilistic things. Let's code them up. And then let's be able to set the way that we are now able to deterministically, therefore reliably, achieve these goals based on these tasks. And that's what we have on our side. Like if I want to analyze a complaint, each of these is a task to achieve the goals. And I've coded up a lot of these tasks. But what I haven't said is that the machine has actually coded up some of these. That is, the legal research questions are coded up on the fly. So really the best systems, I think, are going to take the human-created, reliable, deterministic, and then combine them with the probabilistic to fill in the gaps. Depending on how you define agents, I think between the symbolic agents and the large language model agents, that is going to achieve a lot of legal workflows.
So I use slightly different terminology. I'm calling them fully autonomous AI agents on the one hand, which is you give the agent a goal and say, hey, now go and achieve this, figure out what steps to take, make your own decisions, do your own research, use your own tools, and then when you're done, when you think you've achieved a task, come back and give it to me. Very much like how deep research works today. That's, to me, an autonomous agent. And then you've got your agentic workflows, which I think is closer to your symbolic agent description. The agentic workflows are, you define the workflows. So it's not fully autonomous. It's not going to go and concoct a process for filing documents in courts that doesn't exist. It's going to follow what you told it. But within there could be small little decisions, things that matter less, things that you can play within certain constraints, like you've got a certain amount of flex that you can have, and then executes. And I think those agentic workflows is a different beast to the fully autonomous agents that exist. So I think we're talking about the same things-ish, but I'm calling them workflows and agents. I think like the question that or rather, what I think the distribution will become in 5 years is we'll still have humans. 60%, let's call it. 60% is going to still be humans doing the work. But I think a lot of tasks today that have been really difficult to automate, we can use agentic workflows to automate. And I think that might cover 35% of tasks. Then the final 5% where, look, the outcome, it doesn't matter too much. There's not too much risk in it. Fully agentic workflows in those scenarios. And mostly I think that's kind of research stuff where language models are really, really good at doing legal research. And coming back with a memo that's fully informative that people can make use of. That's maybe the landscape we're moving towards. And question is, how are people going to respond when
Yeah.
the landscape shifts like that?
Agreed. And really, when you think about that legal research workflows, you need yesterday's case for that to happen, not just in the United States, but also in the European Union, where your clients do work, and also Latin America, and also in Asia, right? So having yesterday's case is quite important, number one. Number two, you need to know that Roe v. Wade is not good law anymore. That Roe v. Wade has been overruled by Dobbs. Both the recency of the data and also the ability to say whether something's been overruled or whether the statute has been declared unconstitutional, right? Each one of these things is not something that OpenAI is going to be building, not something that Google is going to be building, right? Not something that Anthropic is going to be building anytime soon. So for an example, deep research, I was doing research on whether a convicted felon can own a gun in various locales. Deep research gave me something from the Attorney General's office in, say, Minnesota, which is good. That's a very reputable resource, but the PDF was from 1991. So it was far outdated, right? So anyway, thanks Google for finding the right source, AG's office, but thanks for nothing, Google, for giving me something from 1991 that's outdated. So I think that the promise is there, but in actuality, you need yesterday's case. And you need to know whether something is still good law or not good law for those research tasks. Of course, there are only 3 companies in the world that have that data. And so when you think about, yes, you need those things. The other question is, getting back to our parts of the elephant, if I am an advisory lawyer, or if I am a regulatory lawyer, that legal research is a massive component of what I do, right? Advisory lawyer, that's almost all I do, is to be able to take my business person's questions and be able to do the research and see whether I should give legal advice as to whether they should do the thing or not do the thing. So advisory needs research all the time. Regulatory needs research all the time. Litigation needs some research, right? I need to be able to see, what is the cause of action that I could claim, but a lot of work is just facts. Finding the depositions and that kind of stuff. So for those workflows, what can large language models do? And the answer is for facts. The large language models do quite well too, right? If I want to be able to say, I have a breach of contract case, what are the facts from my corpus of documents that helps prove that this person breached the contract and prove the elements of breach of contract? Was there a contract? Was it breached? Were there damages? You could be able to say, here are the buckets. Hey, large language model, put each fact into each bucket. It could do quite well in being able to do those. Is that a research task? Kind of, because it's researching the corpus of facts, the evidence, but it's still researching. That's the trees. The forest from the trees is how many of the legal tasks can we actually build in the symbolic AI to be able to say, here are the legal research tasks for you, whether you're a litigator or a transactional lawyer, or whether you're a regulatory lawyer or an advisory lawyer. What are the legal research tasks and what are the factual tasks to be able to extract the facts that matter? And my day job is doing those things every single day. Every single thing I did as a lawyer, I'm cataloging all of the tasks and I'm building out workflows to achieve those tasks, whether it's the symbolic AI or the large language model AI. And I think we as an industry, that is you as a legal tech vendor and I as a legal tech vendor, are just going to keep cranking out those tasks. And the question is how many workflows and tasks are going to be left? And that's a big question mark.
So I think this is an important one, because the assumption that we are both making in this conversation is like fully autonomous AI agents are probably not a good idea to deploy unchecked in a legal workflow context.
I think that's right. Unchecked is the most salient fact there, right? Humans in the loop all the way, right? And the question is how much humans in the loop, how much human time is necessary to give a thumbs up or thumbs down? And that human time is going to be a factor of how accurate is the output. If output is very accurate, say 99% accurate, then almost no human input, right? If it's only 60% accurate, then there's a lot of human time to be able to validate and invalidate the outputs. So I think that if you and I are doing our jobs correctly, it's going to be closer to the 99, therefore maybe less human time on the thumbs up or thumbs down.
But it's still going to need human time, because we can never tell in advance whether an output is or is not correct. Someone has to verify.
Someone or something.
Okay. This is a big one. It was not on my mind at all. How do you trust a language model to verify itself?
This is going to be a very visual heavy, so apologies for those who are dealing. But seeing is better than hearing, so I'm going to now share my screen again. So here you'll see that the legal research question is, tell me about trade secret law regarding former employees stealing customer lists. And here, this text from this case, this text will be non-hallucinated 100% of the time. Not 99, not 90, but so 100%.
You're getting an extract.
So this is ground truth, right? And this is ground truth. So this is stage one. Stage two is we say how well or how poorly does this case answer the user's question? And it gives this analysis. So we'll call this bot number 1 finds this text. Bot number 2 assesses how well the text answers the question. And then bot number 3 provides a number, a confidence score, as to American paper mostly answers the question, whereas another case might 100% answer the question. This is bot 1 gets the text, bot 2 assesses the text, and bot 3 now assigns a confidence score. Why stop at 3? Why not go to bot 4 and bot 5? And as the large language model's costs get less, you could maybe have triple check and quadruple check and quintuple check in this way. And so I think then your rate of hallucination is going to go down and the rate of accuracy is going to go up. And I think your point is going to be, but yes, can you trust that 90%? Or can you trust that 100%? You know, how is that 100% trustworthy? And to that, I respond, how trustworthy are humans to be able to do that? So if you were to look at that example, if you were to say courtesy temporary service, that case, how well or how poorly does that case answer the question? Horace would probably have a different percentage score as Damien would. And so I think this goes to the innate unpredictability of humans. That is, you know, maybe you would say that courtesy temporary service is 100% and that Altavion is 90%. Just like you might say this is 95%, I might say 85%, it might average around 90%. And this might average around 100%. So I think that we now in our large language model present need to think about the inherent unreliability of humans that we've said is the right way to practice law for the last 150 or 200 years. Maybe we shouldn't hold our large language models to a higher standard. Maybe we should say, yes, even though we shouldn't take that 90% answers the question as a numeric certainty, any more than we would say that Horace's 95% and my 85%, that's not numerically certain either, but it's directionally fine. And is directionally fine good enough? Because that's what we've been doing for the last 200 years. But in fact, we've been doing it worse than that because we, you know, when I did the research, I find these 25 cases and I wouldn't even assign a confidence score, right? So now we have a confidence score, so we can actually have something to discuss. So I guess does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yes and no. Yes and no. And I'll answer that in two parts. One is purely probabilistically from a mathematical perspective. Every agent or every language model you pass it through is going to have a certain percentage accuracy. Let's call it 90% all the way through, right? And so every answer that you pass through it, the first agent is going to answer with 90% accuracy. So 10% is going to be wrong, 90% is going to be correct. You get the second agent to review all the answers because you don't know in advance which part is a 90, which part is a 10. Of the 90 it's got right, that's going to get 90-10 split in terms of correct, incorrect. Of the 10% it got wrong, it's going to get 90-10 split. So ultimately it ends up with 90-10, but a different 90-10. And then you go on and on and on and on. So probabilistically, from a pure mathematical perspective, having more agents doesn't improve the accuracy. All it does is it adds more layers until you get to the last agent, whatever that accuracy is. So that's mathematically. But I think we can do better by structuring something in place. And I can't remember who. Might have been Bob Ambrogi, might have been one of the journalists on a Friday call, who said that law firms have been created as the ultimate quality assurance organization, where you've got your junior lawyers who've got a certain percentage correctness, who prepares the first draft, goes to the senior associate who reviews it, gets a better percentage, goes to the partner who's got a better percentage, and ultimately when it goes out the door, all the things that matter, that partners know what to look for, they get those right. Even if there's small little things that are inaccurate, like along the edges. Everything that matters is correct. I don't know how to build a machine like that yet. So I'm kind of with you, but I'm also kind of like, oh, I don't know how. It's the how that's missing for me.
I think that the how is maybe is solved by kind of a trust but verify. So much like you talked about the junior associate writing it, and then the senior associate validates, and then the partner validates the senior associate, and kind of having this chains of quality assurance. I wonder if we could also maybe replicate that and maybe exceed it where you have the actual ground truth. What the large language model has done is it's gone to the particular portion of the PDF and it's found the particular portion of where it actually answers. The question is now, if it gets this 100% of the time, then how much of this human validation do we need? Or is this robot validation good enough?
Hard to say. Hard to say, because I think verification is one of those processes that's extraordinarily difficult to do and extraordinarily difficult to optimize for. Debbie Ting, who is now at Simpson Thacher, she and I were on a call last week planning for a seminar later this year. And it's about what are the tips that we would give to people to actually verify the output of a large language model. And the answer is, well, it's really hard because one, it depends on what the output is. Two, depends on what the source material is. Three, what does the vendor actually give you to aid you in the verification. And then failing all of that by hand. You have to go back to the source document, read the two things side by side, and make a decision as a human. So I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to this one point, which is with AI agents, letting them make their own decisions autonomously in a legal context, just because you could, doesn't mean you should.
I think that's right. The difference between could and should, you probably should if your precision and recall, that is your accuracy, is close to the 99%, right? Then, of course, why not? And then from a ethical standpoint, when does it move from I'm not going to use AI because I'm ethically bound to not use AI? If it's now 99% accurate and more effective than my pre-AI,
yes.
When now am I obligated to be able to use the AI? If I do it manually, am I actually shirking my ethical duties? So, for example, if I did spend 12 hours doing legal research that my tool can do in 5 minutes, and then you could spend 10 minutes validating, are you overbilling your client for that legal research? And so I think that could versus should, it could be two sides of the same coin. Maybe you shouldn't because it's ethically violative, or maybe you need to because if you don't use it, it's ethically violative.
I think we'll know in hindsight. It's like that famous court case in the US where they said, well, what's pornography? You'll know it when you see it. So I think it's a little bit like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's also quantifiable. There's a lot of talk about benchmarks. And should we be benchmarking what the AI does to see whether vendor A does better than vendor B, et cetera? And I'd say that we can get that kind of vendor A versus vendor B benchmark as soon as we have a lawyer A versus lawyer B benchmark. That is, if you have 5 different contracts, which is the better drafted contract? Or 5 human drafted motions, which is the better draft brief? And when we get consensus with that, which by the way, we never will, but then we can start saying, okay, this is a more beautifully crafted contract, or this is a more beautifully drafted brief. So I think that this idea of getting a benchmark for contracts or a benchmark for motions is folly, because the best contract is the one that gets the deal done. And the best motion is the one that wins with these particular facts for this particular judge. Because the brief that works for Judge A
at this particular time,
with this particular zeitgeist, and this particular oral argument is the one that works for this particular jury at this particular time, right? So anyway, this idea that we can benchmark legal work is folly. The best we can do with benchmarking is to say it's the least worst. If the brief says that Roe v. Wade is good law, that's an error. That's not beauty's in the eye of the beholder. The Roe v. Wade good law, that equals error. So I think what we can do is we can benchmark how many errors have been made. And based on those errors, you can say that at best, this is not bad. That is, find all the bad parts and say this isn't bad. What do you think?
I was watching a YouTube short the other day, and I promise this is relevant. It was about a restaurateur who was ranked 50th in the world, and he really wanted his restaurant to be ranked number 1. So he took his entire staff to visit what was then the number 1 restaurant in the world, and afterwards they had a debrief. And everyone's like, oh, this was great, that was great, etc., etc. And this restaurateur said, no, stop. I don't want to hear what's great, because it's a number 1 restaurant, it's all great. Name 2 things that were terrible. And the staff was like, well, the coffee was terrible. Oh, it's just garbage water. And the other was, I'm a beer drinker, and all they had on tap was like, I don't know, Budweiser. The restaurant said, okay, those are the 2 things we're going to work on. We're going to work on the 2 things that are the worst in the best restaurant. And they made one of the wait staff a coffee sommelier, and they made one of the kitchen staff the beer sommelier. This was 11 Madison Park, who has then become the number 1 restaurant in the world. And so your point about what is the least worst argument, it really resonates because like so much of the time, it's not about finding the best because like there are so many ways to be the best. There's so many ways to get the right answer. How do we prevent all the wrong answers? How do we make sure like even in the worst case scenario, our software doesn't deliver shit?
That's right. Let's talk. Should we go down to topic number 3, AGI? Are we even going to get there? And I'm going to add another wrinkle to that. Are we there already?
Oh, I'm going to add one more then, and then it's, does it even matter?
Yes. Does it matter? Lawyers need definitions because without a definition, what are we even talking about? So,
Sure.
How would you define artificial general intelligence, AGI?
Well, let's not use the OpenAI Microsoft measure because I think
that's all
nonsense.
commercially. Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's kind of two things we need to define here. One is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and the other is ASI, artificial super intelligence. The way I think about it is AGI is when a machine is as intelligent as the most intelligent human, singular. ASI, artificial superintelligence, is when a machine is as intelligent as all humans collectively or more. And I think that sort of individual versus collective is a really easy, inverted commas, easy measure of AGI versus ASI. Damien, what do you think? What's your definition?
I take the G of general quite seriously. So the artificial general intelligence is, we're not talking about the smartest, we're not talking about Einstein in physics, right? We're just talking about generalists, right? So if you talk about generalists, you're thinking about the bell curve of mediocrity, right? And so if I've been thinking the average person versus the dumbest person in the world versus the smartest person in the world. That's kind of the edges of the bell curve. But there's a whole mass of humanity in the middle of that bell curve. So really, when I think about artificial general intelligence, I think the middle of the bell curve. When we've been talking about AGI for the last 5 years, we've been talking about how much human work that can displace. We're not talking about how many Einsteins it can displace. We're talking about the masses of the 7 billion people we have in this world. How much of that 7 billion can be replaced with the large language models? So that's what I think of artificial general intelligence, the middle of the bell curve. How many people, the masses, can it replace? And so for that definition, I would say how much of the typical person's work can be accomplished using the machine. That is the average worker in the average field and the average tasks that they have. Can the large language model accomplish those average tasks, the general intelligence? If you have that, I think we may already be there. If you were to ask somebody 5 years ago, if you ask a plain language question and get a 35-page legal research memo with actual cases, statutes, and regulations, and give it to you, is that artificial general intelligence? People say, hell yeah, that's magical, right? And then if you were to say, okay, let's do that not just for one jurisdiction, but let's do this for all 50 states. And now I have a 50-state survey with Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, with a nice table at the bottom to be able to say, is this a right-to-work state? And yes, no, yes, no. Is this artificial general intelligence? You'd ask that 5 years ago in 2020, people would say, that is amazing. Like, yes, of course. That would take an associate, weeks or months to build that. And all of a sudden we crank it out in seconds. I think that we're dealing with moving goalposts here. That artificial general intelligence, there wasn't even a thing called ASI until maybe the last year and a half or so. And I think the reason there is a term ASI is because we've moved past AGI as a talking point. We have to move the goalpost to ASI to say, well, yeah, but we're not an artificial superintelligence because all of the Nobel laureates still have a job, right? So we haven't gone past ASI. But I think that's just goalpost moving. If you have any of these tasks, if you'd ask them in 2020, we're already at AGI.
Look, I don't disagree with you that one, there's a moving goalpost. Like the definitions have shifted. There used to be this idea that artificial general intelligence was the point in time when a model or a system can improve itself. It's a self-improving system. And I think that's a point of no return. I don't know when that's going to be. And I don't think we're there at that self-improving point yet.
We're not.
We're not. But to say that artificial general intelligence is the one, is sufficient to be kind of the middle of the bell curve. I'm not so comfortable with that. Partly because like the idea for me, the word general means that it is generally good at pretty much all thinking tasks that humans have. And when I say smartest humans capable of doing all tasks generally well. That to me is the idea here. And To me, we're not there, but to me, we're very close. But there is a school of thought, and it's Jan LeCun, Gary Marcus, and that cohort, who effectively says today's language models, large language models, are as smart as a house cat. And you're not going to reach human level intelligence with this architecture. I think the recent months of progress from Google, Anthropic, on the one hand, versus from OpenAI on the other hand, are kind of showing two different sides of the story here, where maybe it can, maybe it can't. So the jury is out, but instinctively I side with Jan LeCun.
I think I agree that when he talks about it being as smart as a house cat is able to figure out the trajectory of being able to leap and then being able to land on that particular perch, right? AI is not there yet to do that. So I agree with him on that. Robotics, yes, we definitely need the knowledge of the world to be able to be as smart as a house cat in that way. The question is, how much of legal tasks need to be able to figure out how to leap on a perch, right?
Yep.
So the question is, okay, for most of the knowledge work in the United States, and of course, legal work is a subset of that knowledge work. If you can do it remotely from your computer, if your work involves intellect and working with a screen, how much of the large language models can be able to do those works, that is the remote work, that don't require jumping on a perch, but just figures out cognitively doing things? I think that we have two very different analyses. We don't need to figure out the knowledge of the world. We just need to figure out the knowledge of my subject matter, legal, medical, etc. I think that they are right, but that's kind of a straw man. Nobody's arguing that we are building robots to jump onto perches. Everyone is arguing for the cognitive tasks that are most knowledge work in the United States and worldwide. How much of that work can we do?
This goes back to the distinction between accuracy versus usefulness. We don't need a machine that's 99% accurate if 50% is good enough. And in some cases, like even if it's 99% accurate, unless it's 100% accurate, it's 0% useful. That's also true in some cases. So I think it's a lot about task selection and use case selection. As long as your use case can tolerate some margin of error, if creating a research paper that's 30 pages gets you closer to the answer, then it is 100% useful. It's kind of binary. Like it's either is or is not, to quote Yoda.
Do not try. There is no try. I think that's right. And another vector is how much will the client pay for? So if the machine is able to crank out a 30-page memo in seconds, will they pay for you to essentially recreate that wheel? Or do they say, no, that 5 minutes is good enough? And if they say the 5 minutes you spent on the memo is good enough, what's the value of that memo being created? That is, what is the value of the law firm creating that memo? Or what is the value of an in-house lawyer building that? And of course, those are two different price points. And so really, I think we societally and we within the legal realm need to figure out pricing and be able to say, what is the value of each of these things? What is the value of doing it in-house or the value of doing it externally at a law firm?
My takeaway from this conversation is there's still a lot more exploration to do and a lot more education that we have to give to the marketplace. I don't know if you've seen this. If you try and break GPT, you can absolutely break it. Like it takes 30 seconds of trying. A wonderful little test is if you say to GPT, draw me an empty room with absolutely no elephant in it.
Right.
Guess what you're going to get?
An elephant. Don't think of a pink elephant. Right.
So I think like a lot of this is you have to know how to use these toys, these models, these technologies. And I think it's very easy to poke holes. It's very hard to build things that work, that are reliable, and that are useful. So the elephant in the room, I think, is a thing we have to keep talking about. But ultimately, it's just like avoid that pitfall. It's like Indiana Jones. Just don't jump into the pit.
You're saying that we really need to know how to use the tools. It reminded me of this morning when I was meeting in my backyard with a guy who spent a bunch of years in Mozambique. And he's a computational linguist. And he's doing an analysis of a particular language called Makua. He said, how can I use AI to be able to do this computational linguistic task? And so we sat in my backyard and I literally held ChatGPT's voice mode. So I spoke into the voice mode. All right, you're an expert in computational linguistics. I'm going to have a data set of Mozambique languages and we translated the custom phenotype. So I put my context in here and I said, can you help me think about how I could be able to use computational linguistics here? And it made me think about how I could be able to do fine tuning, cross-lingual embeddings. And then I started saying, okay, do I want to use Hugging Face or do I want to use low code? Can I vibe code these things? Which models? So anyway, so we ended up saying Llama is probably going to be his best way to fine tune it. But the fact that I used the tool to be able to figure out how to use the tool better is the point. The medium is the message, as we've said for decades. And the fact that you can use AI to help use AI is, I think, the medium and the message.
What a brilliant way to end it, to essentially encourage everybody to go out and experiment again. These models are moving so fast. Every time I blink, a new model comes out. I wrote to Stephanie Gautos, who's at Gunderson, and I said, hey, thanks for your weekly updates, because during weeks when I don't do my homework, that's how I catch up.
Stephanie's fantastic. Yeah. And that's right. Everyone do your homework. And the best way to learn how to swim is to keep swimming. So thanks, listeners, for swimming with us, and look forward to the next time in the pool.
And with that, have a happy rest of your day, everyone. Looking forward to our next conversation. Damien, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Horace. It's always a pleasure. And thanks, listeners. See you.
Bye, everyone.